4040 Vision podcast. I'm your host, Khaled Abdallah, and I'm joined today by Robert Little, founder and editor-in-chief of Black Sports Online. How you doing today, Rob?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me on your esteemed show. I feel very privileged.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you for responding to my cold call DM. I know we've been following each other for a while, so got a little bit of back and forth, but this is our first real conversation, so I'm excited to hear about your story, about the journey you've been on in sports, about BSO or Black Sports Online. So let's take it way, way back. When did you know you wanted to work in sports?
Man, real, believe it or not, probably 6, 7 years old. Let me say this. I mean, like every young kid, I had aspirations of being a rapper. I had aspirations of being an NFL player, NBA player, some sort of sports. But I've always been, a sports fan. And I always found it interesting, even when I was a young kid. I grew up on where ESPN, we didn't have all these streaming sites and social media and stuff. So I grew up on Sports Center, Dan Patrick, Keith Olbermann, Stuart Scott. That's how I grew up. And I always had this, the local sports guy was always famous, in the city and everything like that. So when I was a kid, growing up, I said, if I ever went to college, I would go to college for journalism because that's, what I wanted to do. So I'm really one of the lucky ones that, when somebody said I wanted to be an astronaut at 5 and then they go to the moon, I'm actually one of those type of kids that say, so I want to be involved in sports journalism and interviewing and going to games and doing all of this stuff. And it actually, happened for me. It was a circular type of journey, but
Sure,
the destination, I still got to the destination.
Yeah, I was looking at your LinkedIn. Definitely a lot of stops along the way before starting your own site. But did you grow up in like a major sports area, like a major metro area, or
Well, I
in a
grew up in
smaller
St.
town?
Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
So I would say middle America, the gateway, to the West. So I grew up, Cardinals. We had the Rams back when I was a kid. We had the St. Louis Blues, hockey team and stuff. I would say it was definitely it had that small town feel as far as sports, but very dedicated and very passionate. But I was always a national, guy. I was always the
Okay.
type of guy that was like, because this is like the mid-90s. So, this is the Jordan Bulls. This is the Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, Deion Sanders, the Cowboys, the 40 Jerry Rice. This is really what I would like to consider, the prime, thing. This is Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa era of sports, So I grew up in that era. So I really felt like as a kid, I watched everything. I mean, if it was a sport, I remember I watched the Indianapolis 500. I was a Rick Mears fan. I watched the
Okay.
Daytona 500. I was a Dale Earnhardt, fan. I watched, tennis. I was a Boris Becker fan. I watched, golf. I was a Jack Nicklaus fan before Tiger Woods. So if it was sports related, I was into it, as a kid.
You're speaking my language. My
Oof.
wife gives me a hard time because she'll catch me. I don't know, it's like a Thursday night before NFL season starts. I'm watching the CFL, or I'm watching high school football, and I
You
tell
know
her,
what
I'm
I
like,
used to watch
you
late
know,
night in the summers?
uh-huh,
Australian rule football. It used to come on
yo,
ESPN at like 11 o'clock at night because they didn't have no programming. And I thought that was the greatest sport of all time.
oh, it's amazing. There's like 50 people out there. I'm not quite sure what's happening, but people are getting hit and they're celebrating. It's a great time. Yeah, I'm all about that. So I tell her, I was like, as long as someone's competing for something, whether
Oof.
it's on a horse, in a car, with a ball, with a racket, whatever, like I'm gonna watch it. I
Yeah.
might not understand it fully, and I might
Mhm.
not know everybody that's involved, but I'm gonna watch it. So you mentioned going to college and studying journalism. Did you go to Ohio State? I know you're a big Buckeyes
Yeah.
fan. So tell
Yeah.
me
No, yeah.
about,
I went to
yeah.
the Ohio State University. So I'm not just a fan. I'm actually alumni. They
Okay,
ask for
okay.
money every month. Uh, so they want me to help with that NIL to try to get this championship. But yeah, I went to Ohio State. It's an interesting story. It wasn't necessarily because at the time I was a fan of Ohio State. It just happened to be that I had been in St. Louis, Missouri all my life. Never really traveled anywhere. My dad at the time worked in Ohio, and I wanted to go to college, but I wanted to get out of the state. But I didn't want to pay out of state, tuition.
Oh,
So
okay.
I got a scholarship. I got some grants and stuff. Plus, with my dad staying there, I got in-state tuition. So I felt like I wanted to go to the biggest, university, in Ohio, and that's how I literally ended up at Ohio State. Initially, I had always been a Michigan fan
Oh, okay.
because I like, because of the Fab Five. And I was a big fan of Desmond, Howard. So before I got there, I was, I didn't really, being young and being from Missouri, I didn't really understand the rivalry, exactly how passionate it was until I got there and I was wearing a Chris Webber jersey on
Oh,
campus and I almost got jumped.
oh no. That's a tough lesson there. But what was it like going to a school that had such a big? I mean, it's one of the biggest programs in the country. Football, basketball, all the sports. I think even their soccer team and all that is great. So, did that influence you even more? Did that encourage you even more to pursue this sports career?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing about college, at least for me, is that it opened my. I was around so many different people. When you go to a school that large, they're coming kind of from all over, and coming from St. Louis, very kind of centralized type of dealing with certain people. But when I got to Ohio State, so many just different type of cultures and genres and different cliques and different things. And I'm the type of person that kind of gets along with everybody, so I'm interested in every little thing. So meeting guys from New York or the East Coast, type of people, or meeting more people from the Midwest, or I had never really met an Asian person that like that wasn't like not to be racist or anything, but like in St. Louis all we had was Chinese restaurants and like the nail places. But I had never
Mhm.
met like a regular, just an Asian person just going to school and or a I had never had a gay friend until I went to Ohio State, and one of my best friends out there, he was gay. And I had all these misconceptions, about and all these prejudices about different things growing up because you're 18 years old and you listen, and most of your life is influenced by hip hop or TV or whatever it may be, and then you go out into the world and you say, hey, wait a minute, this stuff is not what I think it is. And I always felt like Ohio State, it has so much vast amount of different type of people, is that it helped me become a better person. It also helped me become a better journalist because it helped me understand different types of people. And so therefore when I'm talking about certain things, I feel like I'm able to kind of maneuver those waves a little bit better than some of the others, because I've seen both sides or multiple sides of different people. And I've tried to continue to expand it as I gotten older, going to different places, meeting different people, talking to different people. And so even though the site's Black Sports Online, you're getting it from a
Mhm.
Black man's perspective. You can also get it from a perspective as someone that's been outside of that bubble as well.
Yeah, that's probably the best thing about college.
Mm,
Even the education is not just in the classroom, right? It's
right.
meeting all the different people. It's especially if you go to a university like Ohio State, that's
Mm.
attracting people from not just all over the country, but probably all over the
Oh,
world.
the world.
So
Yeah.
you're being exposed to, like you said, all kinds of cultures and
Mm,
peoples. And obviously, growing up, a lot of us we kind of grew up in like a 5 by 5 square miles. We didn't really go that far. We didn't
yep.
travel much. We just knew what we knew. So after college, I saw on your LinkedIn again, I did some creeping
Mm.
in. You had some radio jobs. So what was the transition like from your college career to moving into working in radio?
Oh, it was awful. I'll be honest with you.
Okay.
um, and I swear I tell anybody that's between the ages of like 16 and like 20, when they ask me about school and stuff, I say the one thing that I regret more than anything else is I was there at school and I was learning, but I wasn't really taking advantage of all the things that were available to me. I just felt like if I got the degree, somebody would just hand me the, my dream, job. And that's not how the real world, works. Is that, I graduated and I was out there and I'm like, okay, I should be working at ESPN or I should be doing this. And it doesn't quite, work like that. And I had a lot of odd jobs, the radio stations that I worked at, it wasn't like I was on air, I was getting the coffee. I was doing clerical work. To make ends meet, I worked at, multiple call centers. I sold car insurance. I sold cable. I sold better what are the things for your car, the car insurance stuff. So I did all these odd jobs, and then it was a couple of years after college, and I'm like, I'm kind of just floating. I'm not really getting to what I thought that I would you be. And the farther out that you get away from college and you're not in your chosen field, the harder it becomes for you. So there was that brief period where I really started to wonder, like, what am I going to do with my life? Because I was kind of rudderless and I hadn't really made the connections. I really hadn't really bought into what it was that I was trying to do. Like I had a vision, but I wasn't focused enough on it. I just, thought that my
Sure.
talent would just carry me or my intelligence would carry me. And I had to learn that's not how it works, in the real world. Nothing is, handed to you. You have to really go out and get it. That's why I always say I'm very blessed and lucky because the only reason I started Black Sports Online was just to keep a relevance. So if I was applying for jobs, I can show them that I was doing some sort of work. I never actually thought it would be a viable thing that I would turn it into a career, and I just feel blessed that happened to me.
I mean, that alone is a genius idea that you couldn't get the experience, so
Ooh,
you kind of made the experience yourself by
correct.
creating your own site and doing all that. So you kind of skipped the middleman of maybe working an internship or something. You created your own. So I did read, the essay you have on why you started Black Sports Online and why it's called Black Sports Online. So why don't you tell our listeners about what was the impetus behind creating the website and of course the name behind the website?
So we have to go back in time, and I know that's kind of hard for a lot of people because it doesn't apply today in 2024
Sure.
as much. But back in 2005, so we're almost 20 years into this. When I was I was 23, 24 years old. The internet in and of itself was just still more in its infancy. When I was in college, getting a Yahoo email was a big deal. So at that point, you saw sports media specifically and entertainment media starting to embrace a little bit of the online, access. You had ESPN.com, you had Deadspin, you had things like that was out there. And for someone like me that couldn't break into the radio, the newspaper, the television, I felt because I had this experience working on websites and things like that, that maybe the sports, that would be my way, in, or like I said, to at least keep my name out there. But as I did my research, I noticed that when you looked across the landscape at that time, all of the websites were, first off, they were anonymous. You never knew who was actually the sports website. You never knew who was running them. Secondly, they were all kind of this cookie cutter, very white way of telling, sports, very, by the numbers, very, very
It's like the
bland and
Sports
everything.
Illustrated,
Yeah,
Sporting
there
News,
was no
kind of like
sizzle.
the
There was
yeah.
no sizzle. And I was watching TV. I was watching a wild card game, the Green Bay Packers and the Minnesota Vikings, and Randy Moss fake mooned the Green Bay Packers crowd, and Joe Buck lost his mind. And I knew Joe Buck because he's from St. Louis, but he just lost his mind. And he called him everything under the sun except the N word. Now I, at 23, 24 years old, knew the reason that Randy Moss had did that was because the Packers fans often fake moon or moon the bus of the opposing team. So it's just a little get back and a little, back and forth. Definitely the anger and and Buck will tell you even today that he regrets this. And the way it
Yeah,
came
he
across, a white
overreacted a
man
little bit.
speaking of a black man like this. And at that point, I'm like, we need something to offset this type of media. Somebody that, and don't forget, at this time I'm the same age as the athletes, more or less. So, and I'm from the same type of places. So I felt like I understood the more than a 40-year-old white guy in the booth or a 50-year-old white guy on the news. And I didn't see that. And so I was like, I'm going to create something that if Joe Buck does that again, I'm going to have an outlet that I can tell Joe Buck, no, this is not how you talk to people, or this is not that. So it basically initially was like a policing website, almost like an awful announcing type of website,
Sure.
to
Yeah.
where, I would do these editorials about things that I would see in the media that I didn't like. and would speak on them, how they spoke about Allen Iverson or things that was happening with Kobe or Shaq, or if I felt like something was not being told, given a different perspective, and that's where the whole Black Sports Online comes from, is sports from a different perspective, that's where I would come in at. And that
Mhm.
was the precipice of the original aspect, of the site. It was the editorial site that was kind of a watchdog, over media, and gave you insight on Black athletes that maybe you wouldn't have gotten, because if you live in rural Ohio, how would you understand anything that was going on with Allen Iverson? How would you understand anything that's going on with Randy Moss, Terrell Owens? Because I went to Ohio State and I did have the education, I knew how media worked behind the scenes. So I kind of had an advantage. So I said, no, the producer knows that if you call Randy Moss a thug, what's going to happen. More, you're going to get more ratings and all of this stuff. So
Yeah.
I would basically be like someone that, would out this type of stuff. Now, obviously, it's evolved,
Sure.
since
Yeah.
then, but that was the origin of what I was trying to do initially, with the site.
Yeah, I think it's much needed voice in
Mhm,
the sports world because like you said, I mean, the institutions that were covering
mhm,
sports, the legacy media, ESPN, SI, all these things, like obviously they've gotten more diverse over time, but back then, I mean, 20 years ago was a long time. It was still largely white, largely male, largely an
mhm,
older white male. So again, like you said, how is a 40, 50-year-old white guy going to relate to a 20-year-old black
mhm,
athlete who's doing something that, it might be completely harmless, like a fake
right.
mooning in the grand scheme, it's completely harmless. But of
Mhm,
course, from his lens, it's old school sports, it's
mhm.
unwritten rules, blah blah stuff like that. We still see it a little bit to this
Yeah,
extent, but
we do.
there's a lot more
Mhm,
dissenting voices, I
mhm.
think, that are like, no, it's really not that serious.
Yeah.
Uh, so was there like a turning point in your site? Because I know you went from it's something that you just created on your own to
Mhm,
now you're a credentialed. I've seen you post that you're at NBA press conferences, you have your writers at major sporting events. What was their turning point from like a personal website kind
mhm.
of thing to a legitimate media outlet?
Yeah, social media. I mean, it's. I think that changed everything for a lot of us that were online at the time. I think I had a little bit of an advantage because I had a jump on people that already kind of knew who I was before social media kind of took off. But what social media did that took it from, like you said, the personal website to more of something that's national, is that you had the ability with social media to get your stories and to have your voice now heard in a very easy and simple format to people all over the world, all over the country. You can just hit one button and all of a sudden you can have 100,000 people reading, what you had to say. And obviously we've seen what that has become. But in the early days of social media, uh, us quote unquote bloggers, we use that to switch on from just what we would consider, anonymity to being actually national, because we were actually breaking stories. And we were breaking the type of stories that at the time mainstream media didn't want to touch. The things that you see now on ESPN or all of these other sites and everything, you didn't really see back in the early 2010s. You didn't, all of the stuff about the baby mamas and the rest and drugs and the viral moments and all of this. They really wasn't covering that. They were still mostly, on the field type of, situation, unless it was something really, really serious. Well, we went deeper to that. And we struck a nerve in the sense that we found out that a lot of people like what happens off the field more than what happens on the field,
That's true.
because there's a lot of off the field time. And I would say the first story that really switched me from just some guy that had a website to people actually knew who I was ironically the Steve McNair story, uh,
I
because
remember that. Yeah.
that was something that I got a hold of, because you got to remember this is 2009, 2010. Everything now, something happens, everybody knows in a minute. It wasn't like that back then. And I had a source that, even though the police had been on the scene for hours and nobody could actually confirm, but actually had a friend that was in the Nashville Police Department actually called me. I was at a friend's wedding believe it or not. I took the call, but I never went nowhere without my laptop, even back then. And I got a
Smart.
call and said, "Hey, I'm going to tell you, Steve McNair has been shot. He's been killed." I said, "What?" And I looked online. I didn't see anything. I saw one little blip, maybe of something, but it wasn't anything. And he's like, "Look, I'm telling you, he's with the police department. This is happening. I'm here on the scene. Write the story right now." And I wrote the story at the wedding, posted the story. I was one of the groomsmen at the wedding. So we did the wedding. The wedding was like 2 hours or something like that. By the time I got back to my laptop, it had hit the news. But because of the way Google was set up, I was the only one that had it up there. At 5 million things right there.
Wow.
I had messages from CNN and all these other people asking to comment, how did I know, and all of this stuff. So all of a sudden, I'm on all of these shows and all of this stuff, and I've become a mainstream media, person. And we just kind of took off from there, just because we were unique in the space for a very, very long period of time before kind of mainstream media kind of caught on to what we
Mhm.
were doing, and then not just me, but also others, and kind of started doing it
Yeah.
themselves.
Did you have any, I mean, I guess the question is, as a journalist, first of all, how do you decide, what you're willing to cover or not? Do you feel like you have more freedom because you don't have to worry about, because you're your own boss, you don't have to worry about kind of some of the consequences maybe of some of reporting on something that's as sensitive as a Steve McNair situation?
Well, in retrospect, because I was still very young back then, I shouldn't have did it. I only had one source, and if I was
Mm,
wrong, no telling what would have happened to me. You're supposed to. I would have in 2020. I would have waited. I would have let somebody else do it first, because I couldn't take that type of risk, especially as an independent one, because your reputation is pretty much all you got. You don't have really can't be like TMZ and just be wrong and keep moving. That'll hurt you for a long period of time. I think I've always went by this rule from going forward, from that, is that if it's public, then, it's fair game. If it's private, meaning that, somebody tells me something and it really nothing, it has nothing to do with nothing, I won't post it. So I give you an example. So if a girl comes on and says, X player forced me to have an abortion, and here are the text messages, and it's on Instagram, well, that's public. Everybody can see it. So if I
yeah,
report on it, I'm not doing it. You saw it. You're either gonna see it on Instagram or you're gonna see it on. You're gonna
you're
see it.
not breaking the story,
But
right?
if a girl were to text me or to email me and say, "This athlete asked me to have an abortion. Here's the text messages." That's not illegal to ask somebody to have an abortion. It is illegal though. Not illegal, but a lot of sites will run with that because that's the information. I would not, because it's not public, and that has nothing to. It's not illegal. Your relationship problems are not a story to me. Now, if you decide that you want to put it out there, you want to decide you want to, then I will report on that. But I'm not going to be the one that outs something personal that's private. And trust me, I get nude photos from athletes. I get all. You'll be surprised if I just posted everything that was sent to me. My house would have more bedrooms. But I feel like there is a line that even if sites and people that do salacious type of news, that you can't cross. And to me, I would look at it like this: if someone sent you something about me and privately, they say, here's him BSO with the shirt off, and you post it, I would be upset about that, because it has me with my shirt off has nothing to do with nothing. Now if I was you caught me on video, my shirt off, running around and stuff, that's fine. So that's the rule that I kind of set in place for myself, to kind of where I can look in the mirror and be like, I'm cool with what I'm doing.
That's great that you have those moral limits, because, like you said, a lot of places don't. They'll just post whatever if there's nude leaks, whatever it is. So, like, what level of editorial control do you have, or do you exercise on? Because I know you have a pretty big staff of
Mm-hmm.
writers. So, how do you make sure that they're the ones that also follow that same rule? Because I'm sure they get stuff sent to them all the time too.
They'll have to run it all through me. That's something that I've never kind of like, even if I don't mind them doing their own type of stories and finding their own type of stuff. But everything I do get, this is what I'm writing about today, or this is a story I think I got, And nine times I think the format is pretty, simple. If you see it, that means it's public. If it's, I have gotten, writers or other people or even other people from different sites say, hey, I got this explosive information and everything. I give you an example of one, like the Dwight Howard like lawsuit stuff, right? The person that filed the lawsuit sent me all of that stuff before they filed the lawsuit, and they wanted to out him for his, extracurricular activities. And I knew it was legit because I know what Dwight be up to from time to time. This is not the first time anybody's ever
Right.
heard that, but I was like, no, because you say you're gonna file. He did all this quote unquote stuff to you. I'm not gonna, just put him out there saying he assaulted you and all of this stuff because I'm not the police. You know. Now, if you go to the police and there's a police report and there's a document, that I can say, well, here's the document, then I'll post it. And that's what he ended up doing off my advice. Now the case
Mhm.
got thrown out, but my thing is, if you say somebody's assaulted you, I'm not gonna be your watch. I'm not gonna be your dog. I'm not gonna go out there and do it for you. You got to put that on. Things. The Dak Prescott thing. Same thing. We got something from that lawyer and that lady saying, Dak Prescott. Hey, listen, when you file, send me the lawsuit. Then I'll post it. But I'm not. I don't want to be the guy that's like, the shade room. Like, we're sending you dirt and you putting on it. To me, I've never crossed that line, and therefore that's helped me keep my credibility. That's why I can go to an NBA game, an NFL game, a baseball game, a boxing, because people know that the athletes in and of themselves know that, well, Rob hasn't crossed me like that, or the leagues know that I won't cross that editorial line.
Yeah, like you said, you'll report on the news and things that are public, but you're not going to be crossing that barrier into being a
Mm.
tabloid,
Yeah.
basically being that TMZ or Shade Room or whatever all these other websites that exist.
Mm.
So, like you said, that does maintain your credibility. It makes sense. I think you have to keep that border there, or else you're going to cross into some real dangerous territory. So, when did you start covering entertainment along
Mm.
sports? Was it just like you said, people being more interested in off the
Mm.
field stuff, so you decided to venture into that territory as well?
Well, it was out of necessity. I'll be honest with you. At my core, like we talked about at the beginning, I'm a sports guy. I would just ideally in my life, I would just want to talk about sports. That's really all I would want to talk about. But I'm also not one dimensional, and I feel like unfortunately, black people in media and just in life, a lot of times get put in this box. It's like you have to do one. You can only do one thing. This is the thing that you do, and don't do anything else. But I've never kind of been like that. I have interests outside of sports. So what pretty much what happened was it's just a numbers thing. It's like before, we would do 80% sports stories and 20% like other stuff. But then we started noticing the 20% was making more money than the 80%. So the 80 started to become 50, and you know what I mean? So what we found out was that it's hard to compete in a world where we say, well, Caitlin Clark has 20 assists. Well, everybody's going to say that, right? It's very difficult to compete with ESPN and, like you said, SI Fox and all of these people that, when people want to get like numbers, that's where they go. But, we can talk about Caitlin Clark's boyfriend, then, we're going to get a little something extra that we wouldn't get just talking about her game. And let's be honest, and I'm going to be honest about this, and I'm going to brag a little bit, just a little bit. I'm going to take a
Sure.
little bit of credit, for this. If you look at how the athletes actually act, they have leaned into that other side of,
Oh,
hey, let's do the
absolutely.
fashion. Let's do our rapping. The WNBA, they won't admit it, but I know it's a fact. And somebody I know. I'm not going to tell you how I know, but
Sure. Can't reveal your source.
those runways, oh, this is what Angel Reese is wearing. This is what Cameron Brink is wearing. Oh, all of that. That's from us. Okay. that that's
Okay.
that's 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 us showing them that the whole thing about the NBA players coming in and what they wearing and what they say, does not mean that, we don't care about your game. But if you want people to watch, you want people viewers, you want eyes on your product, it's okay to put Angel Reese on that little runway before the game with a fit, and she does a little thing, and they talk about 20 rebounds. They go hand in hand in 2024. And that type of media is a creation of not just me, but a lot of us who came up in those 2010s that focused on that, the fashion. And then what happened was the leagues and the networks realized, why Stephen A. Smith walking in with a camera? Walking into the arena and they got that's all us.
Mhm.
That's all the stuff that we used to report on that now they're taking advantage of, now. And so, like, when I say it was out of necessity, it was actually really was because, it was hard to get paid back then. And we had to have stories that people actually read or clicked on to get paid. So we would do the fashion and we would do the off the court, who they were dating and all of that stuff, which now the mainstream media, you look at the New York Post or you look at, so all of this stuff is stuff that TMZ and us and others were doing 10 years ago, is now what makes everybody money in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, even ESPN, it might not be leading off Sports Center, but it's going to be in a Sports Center Instagram or Twitter post
Exactly.
or
You
whatever
got
it
it.
is.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I mean, I definitely want to talk about the WNBA because it is a hot topic. I feel like you brought up an interesting point about the runway and the fashion. I think in general with women's sports, they might be more hesitant to, I don't want to say sexualize themselves, but sell themselves
Mm-hmm.
in like, hey, I'm a good looking woman and I'm an
Mm-hmm.
athlete.
Yeah.
Whereas the male athletes, it's not as big of a deal because I think they don't have to worry about the baggage that comes with it.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think was the turning point that made the WNBA say, hey, we can do this and still have people appreciate the game that we're playing?
I think you're right. I mean, I do think that some people are watching just because they like what a young lady looks like, But
Sure.
when you're talking about numbers, right? You got to get your numbers. I mean, when you've lost money for 20 years, you got to start thinking a little bit, outside of the box. You know what I'm saying? You have to see the entertainment value in sports. And it's okay. It's all right. I mean, if nobody should have to hide if they're good looking. You know what I'm saying? Like, that shouldn't be something that you should be afraid, to say. Because I'm sure when Serge Ibaka was walking around, and all the girls were like, "Ooh, they didn't really care about his post moves." We trust me. I mean, you've been to NBA games. There's a section, that is not there to watch. I listen. I tell you the truth. I'll tell you a story. I went to a Denver Nuggets game. My wife's a Denver Nuggets fan. We went to a Denver Nuggets game. We were sitting right behind the Denver Nuggets, bench. There were girls behind. They looking at Jokic on the phone. How much he don't make, who he's married to, how tall he is.
Scouting report.
So, this is Jokic. Then when they found out Jokic was married, they moved on to Victor Chanchaw. I'm like, how much is he making? So yeah, so having guys say, "Oh, I want Angel Reese to fly me out." I get it. I understand that you want to be seen on your merit, but I think what they're finding out is that you can do both. And people appreciate both. And I think with Caitlin Clark, because that's definitely not, that's just ball. There ain't nothing else that's going, on there. That if you get enough eyes on the product, no matter how you get them there, that's the thing. Once the eyes on the product will sell itself. But if nobody's watching, it doesn't matter. So you have to get them in. And I think the young ladies have realized when you're only making $78,000 in the WNBA, you're gonna need that Reese's Pieces contract. You're gonna need that Reebok contract. I saw Cameron Brink and Cameron Brink is out. As soon as they drafted Cameron Brink, there's a big old billboard in downtown LA. They're
New Balance,
realizing
right?
that
Everywhere.
ball, just like the NBA players and everything. Odell Beckham is not a good wide receiver anymore, but he's still Odell Beckham. He's still at the fashion week and all of that stuff because you have to learn how to market yourself. And I
Mhm.
think that's something that the WNBA was slow to understand. They were marketing themselves the wrong way. And I think they're finally starting to figure out the best way to market these young ladies. And now they're seeing, thanks to Caitlin Clark and others, they're seeing the benefit of
Mhm. And I think they're doing it most importantly in a way that doesn't cheapen the product because there's people with I think personally I think they're crazy. They're like, oh, lower the rims, smaller
it.
balls, things
Mm-hmm.
like that. Like you're gonna cheapen the product on the court where you can just market these players as people and
Mm-hmm.
the fans will be attracted to that player as a person and a personality and not just for their game. And it's just like on the men's side. I mean, there's a lot of dudes out there that are big LeBron fans just because they like him as a person. They like the things that he
Mm-hmm.
does off the court. So it's not a big leap, I think, from one to the other. So before we jump into some more sports topics, I want one last question about your website, Black Sports Online. And what's been, I think the most challenging part in growing and maintaining this business, especially in this landscape where there's so much competition, there's new sites popping up every day, there's athlete podcasts, all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. How are you fighting to stay relevant?
Yeah, it's tough. I'll be honest with you because the things that we revolutionized, and I think this is history. This is not something that is like brand new. Normally, when independent people bring ideas to the table, they get swallowed up, by bigger companies, bigger man. I mean, you can look for music. That's just the way, things work. Like somebody may create a sound and next thing you know, but the sound was great for them, but they're independent. But Drake does it and it's a $2 million, $1 billion record. I think the difference between me and some of my contemporaries that haven't been able to kind of keep up is that I made a point of getting actually out there to cover things. So I never was totally dependent just on the website. So therefore, my name recognition and brand is higher because just more people know who I am because I was out there. When they came back from when the Cavs came back from 3-1, I was on the court. When Brady came back from 28-3, I was interviewing Bill Belichick, after the game. I've been at world premieres. I've been on red carpets. I've done ESPYs. I've done interviews. I've been ringside. I've been courtside. I've been pretty much everywhere that someone who wanted to be in the business could be. So when you say the brand, it carries a little, weight. The social media brand carries a little weight. And I think also the most important thing is you always have to reinvent yourself almost year after year after year after year. Like I said, I started off as a editorial writer. Then we switched that up and we got more into entertainment. Then we switched it up and we started doing more, live events. You know, when I saw things was, people were stealing not necessarily my style, but just the way that we do it. Say, okay, well, you want to? Nobody can write a headline like me. I used to write AP headlines just like they taught you. You just write the
I
headline.
wanted to ask you
Yeah,
about the
yeah. And
headlines.
I said, well, okay, well, hold on, but they're gonna give us 280 characters. I'm gonna give you a little story in the headline. So if we talking about one story and you see it come up on your feed, my headline is gonna beat their headline. So that's who's gonna get clicked on. And I'm still changing. Even to this day, the things with social media, the algorithms. You see what Elon is doing with Twitter. People don't click as much links because you can go on you're on Instagram or everybody's social media page has the information or the videos, right there. So, I had to, do other things outside of the website to stay profitable. But after being in the business, for so long, I think you have a little rope, you have a little carte, blanche that, it's BSO, it's Robert, that's doing this. And so the way I kind of gauge it is if I'm talking, people are still listening. And if I say something, are people still taking it seriously? Or do people come to me for certain, things and certain topics? And I'll be honest with you, it's terrible out there. So I don't even speak on as much as I would like to because it's so it's really toxic right now. But I do feel like if I say something, if I speak up, if I talk about a topic, if I talk about a player, if I talk about a league, or if I talk about something that's happening in real time, I still have an audience that say, well, if Rob said it, then, I'm going to rock, with it. And as long as I have that core, audience, then I think I'll be okay.
Yeah, the toxic is is the perfect word to
Yeah.
describe. Everything is so
Mm,
divisive. Anything that you say can be
mm,
misconstrued and taken a certain way, and people run with it. And I mean, I've seen your comment section on Twitter, and it's a
mm,
bit of a minefield, to put it mildly.
mm,
Uh, so I wanted to switch gears a little bit, just touch on some quick sports
mm,
topics, some of the big hitting things that are happening these days, especially from a voice like
mm.
you, a lot of experience and authority in this space. So we'll do it maybe kind of lightning round
Sure.
style, but take as much time as you want.
Mm,
So we're what, 2 weeks into college football under the new conference realignment. What are some of your early feedback on seeing, USC with a Big Ten patch, or Arizona in the Big 12, or Texas in the SEC?
It's odd, really, because I played the NCAA game that from EA, and initially I played as Ohio State, and it didn't even hit me. I put in the thing and I saw the schedule. And I'm like, USC and UCLA. What the hell is going on? Like, is this? Why am I having these out of conference games? I'm like, oh, there's no Pac 12 anymore. The college landscape has changed so quickly. I mean, it really went from, oh, we're doing the BCS, to like, we may never see a playoff. We may never see this, to super conferences, 12-team playoff. Um, I think eventually there's not going to be any conferences. I feel like
Yeah.
they may be, one big super, conference, and it's just going to be, who's the best, teams, because you can't. It's a Big Ten, but it's 18 teams in it. And then you got other. It's not even fair. It's like, because other conferences only have 8 teams in it. So like, how do you even preface all that? So I think at some point, especially with NIL and all this stuff, the whole thing is just going to blow up. There may not even be an NCAA. It's just going to be these college teams, and the playoff maybe expands. It's going to be more like basketball. Um, just, it's so much money that's going on right now. But it's a little odd to see where USC may have to go to Northwestern in the middle of
Weird.
November.
Yeah.
But as far as a fan, uh, getting the more teams in the playoffs, I'm a fan of that. Just because more football, and I get tired of the same 4 teams. And my team is one of the same 4 teams, but I get tired of Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan. Maybe Clemson. It sucks to start a season and know, like, your team has no shot. Now with 12 teams, maybe you can get a Texas A&M, a Notre Dame will get in. You can get a team that's maybe 9-3. Maybe they get hot and it becomes a Cinderella story. So I am excited about that.
Yeah, I think the fans come out on top, and of course, I mean the players with all this money coming around. At least
Man,
they're benefiting. That's my main takeaway. Is I don't love it because I missed the Pac-12. I'm a Pac-12 guy, but the players are coming out on top, and that ultimately that's what matters. They're the ones putting their lives or their bodies on the line. Uh, the WNBA. We talked about it a little bit, but a lot of people feel like this is an inflection point for the league where they're kind of that hockey stick level growth where they're just going to shoot
mm,
up. And I think we're starting to see that. Do you agree with this as being an inflection point, or is this kind of a flash in the pan with just, Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark catching fire here?
I think it's legit. I think this is their turning, point. The Caitlin Clark is an anomaly. I mean, it's truly an anomaly, because it would be one thing if there was never any, like, white girls that were ever good, but that's not the case. That is simply not the case. I mean, for the 30, 40 years, why it is a predominantly African American league, just like, the NBA, they've had some cold white girls come throughout the last. I remember Rebecca Lobo was like, the thing. So when people say, oh, well, it's just because she's white, I have to push back against that, because there's been a lot of, white girls that came in and did not have this type of impact. She is an anomaly. She is just different. It's organic. And you see it happen every generation, or so. You get your LeBron, you get your Jordan, You get your old Tiny. Every couple of 20 to 15, 20 years, or you get a Wimby. These anomalies come up. And it just happened that she just came up at the perfect time. The NIL, the social media, the TV rights, the WNBA sorely needing, someone. She single-handedly will change the way that this league is probably seen for the next, 20, years or so. And I love Angel Reese. And I think Angel Reese is an excellent player. I think she was always going to be an excellent player in the thing. But when you attach Angel Reese to Caitlin Clark, that blew her up as well. And you can't, that's not something that you can actually, deny. It's factual and happening. So you look at that, and then you have like Juju Watkins coming in, going to come in. You have Paige. Now you see this pipeline of all of these other people that are going to come and that's going to benefit from what Caitlin Clark did. They're going to be doing documentaries on this 20 years ago about how the WNBA went from blah to, where they're up there with all these other sports. There's going to be probably a time where the WNBA in 10 years has 80 games like the NBA. And this is the point in time that it happened. It's a Magic and Bird type of situation. It's a Jordan situation. It's a Maguire Sosa situation. It's a Tom Brady. It's a Mahomes. She's in that type of thing, and I'm happy, for it. Even though the discourse is awful, I am happy for the league.
At least people are talking about it, and
Yeah.
that's great to see. But you're right; it's a perfect storm, and I'm totally with you. NFL parity, is it
Mm.
overrated? I mean, people talk about the NFL being the league of parity, but I mean, I feel like we're seeing the same four teams in the Final Four every year for the last 5-10 years. Is it overrated?
I don't think it's overrated. I think there's enough hope that your team can make a run. Like you think like the Lions, right? Even it's not necessarily maybe your team gets to the Super Bowl, like because we keep saying the 49ers, see the Chiefs, you saw the Patriots for a long period of time. So I think it's just the hope. And if you're you can be a Lions and be terrible, and then you can be a Texans and be terrible. And as long as you have hope, I think the fandom in you makes it more interesting. And the fact that the NFL is only now 17 weeks, you feel like it's life and death every week. Like you feel like you're going through it, every week. But then you also feel like we could just get in the playoffs. The Packers hadn't been what I would consider a Super Bowl. I mean, they were half away. The Ravens, haven't been back for a while. They're half away. So I don't think it's overrated in the sense that you can be a team that was last year was not great. But say Aaron Rodgers stays healthy. Now, if you're a Jets fan, you got hope. And I think that's maybe the biggest difference between, I say, college football before was if you were at Wisconsin, you had no hope. you know, Even if
Sure.
you went 9-3, which is a good season for them, or 10-2, you knew you wasn't going to beat Ohio State and Michigan or whatever. And there's no hope. Now you're like, well, if I go 10-2, I might sneak in at the 11th seed and maybe I can make a run. And I think so. In that sense, I think the NFL, the way it's set up, is still pretty good because who knows what? It's always some team that was terrible last year that ends up surprising people. So I think that is what makes it kind of a league that's wide as big as it is.
Yeah, worst to first is almost like a founding principle of
Yeah.
the NFL. So yeah, the hope. If you're a Detroit Pistons fan, you don't have hope. But
I
if
know.
you're I don't know,
Yeah.
whoever, if you're a Carolina Panthers fan, it's week one. You're still, you're undefeated, so you got
Yeah.
hope. Uh, the NBA.
Mm,
So I think this Summer Olympics highlighted an issue where some people may say it's an issue where the American stars in the NBA are getting close to the end of their careers.
mm,
You got Steph and LeBron and KD, probably like the shining lights of this generation, all in their late 30s. And everybody else, just about everybody else behind them in that
mm.
top 5, top 10 list are not American. Do you think that's a problem for the NBA, or is it just a fact?
No, I don't. I don't think it's a problem. I think if you ball, you ball. You know what I mean? Like I think just when we're talking about Caitlin Clark, one of the things that frustrates me is that in society as a whole, we have a lot of issues. You know what I mean? We have like real life issues, right? We talk about basketball. Right? Like when we talk about basketball, like when we talk about racial issues and all that, we, it's just send me to basketball. You know, there's school shootings going on, there's election going on, there's immigrants, there's all type of actual real life stuff, wars and Russia, and we just talk about a girl that plays basketball. And I think with the NBA, and I know the argument gets in there sometimes, but when I'm watching Luca, I'm like, that's a bad boy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When I watch Jokic, I'm like, man. When I watch Wemby, I'm like, man, I'm not, I hate people that say I don't see race. But when I watch him ball, I'm just seeing ball. I'm like, this guy's great. And I don't really care if he came from Serbia or if he came from Brooklyn. If he can play, he can play. We just talk about
Mhm.
basketball. And this is what the NBA wanted. This was David Stern's dream. This is Adam Silver's dream, is that it's global. The reason the NBA makes as much money as they do is not because of American ratings, because they're not that great. It's because they got all this stuff going on world, wide. So if the next quote unquote GOAT is Wemby, I'm not gonna be like, well, I wish he was from, Brooklyn, just because he's from, France. I'm just gonna be like, he's great. I will say that there's always going to be a pipeline of American basketball players. We started today. There's always going to be an Anthony Edwards. There's always going to be somebody out there that's going to be good. But if it's just competitive, I don't think it's a problem, for the league. I think the people have a problem because they feel like they can't maybe market it. Can't market a Jokic like you can
Sure.
market an Anthony Edwards in a say America. But I think you look at somebody like Giannis. I see Giannis on like 55 commercials.
He's everywhere.
He's
Yeah.
everywhere, So it's not that it can't be done. I just think that I think a lot of people are in their feelings because you're not getting the top guys are not necessarily Americans, but hey, that just says a lot about how good things are outside of the U.S.
Yeah. Hoop is hoop. It's all
Mm.
that matters.
Mhm.
Well, thank you, Rob. I really appreciate your time, man. Thank you. I know you're a busy guy, so I really appreciate you taking the time out to come on this podcast and tell me about your journey and talk shop with me. So really appreciate you, man. Thank you.
No problem. Anytime you call me right in between. My 3-year-old just started school. I tell everybody that. Little preschool. She's hanging in there. So I had a little time between taking her to school and come picking her up. It's only a half day. But in the end, I guess that's the most important thing is that just to let your people know this, and I always try to end it with this. The best thing that I can say is that BSO and Black Sports Online and everything, what it allowed me to have that's more important than anything than the recognition and fame and whatever you want to call it, is that it gave me the ability to have a life that I didn't have when I was a kid. And thankfully will allow my children, I have 3 girls, to have a life that was better than mine, growing up. So for every person that ever clicked on the story, that ever replied to anything, good, bad, or ugly, I thank you because without you, I couldn't have any of this family situation that I have now. And I tell you, I'd be working at Walmart probably. I'd be 40-year-old working at Walmart if it wasn't for the people. So I always try to thank them anytime. I thank you just for having me on, telling my story. I do want people to know that I always appreciate, them because without you guys and everybody else, there wouldn't be a BSO.
That's beautiful. Not to get too sentimental, but I do appreciate
Mm.
that sentiment. And what I really appreciate about you is that you give opportunities to other people and you're not gatekeeping, you're not pulling that ladder up behind you as you're climbing up in the sports world. So I do really appreciate that about you and everything you stand for. And, it's again been great interacting with you over the years. And I'm really happy that we were able to have this conversation here.
Awesome, bro. You keep doing what you're doing, man. You're one of my favorite followers on there. You know why? Because you're rational, man. You playing what you're saying. You got passion, but you're not crazy. And I trust me.
I try.
In 2024, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Have a good one, brother.
Yeah, you too, my friend.